The Awakening of Joel Singer, Part 8, Usurpers, Unmasked. Written by Scott McCaffrey, narrated by Luke Welland. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and share with all your friends. Mike caught up with Joel as he was on his way to the lab. "Hey, Joel, how you doing?" the thin young man asked. Good. How are you? I heard you're due to be released next month. Congratulations. And I heard Manuel is going to be your partner. That's good news, too. It's you who deserves the props, man. You turned my whole life around here. I got a job at the modular housing plant waiting for me, and a baby girl I got a lot of catching up to do with. She's 10 now, and she don't even know me. Thank you, Mike, and good luck, Joel said as he turned to go. Hey, can you wait a minute? I wanted to talk to you about something. What's that? Do you remember my cousin Horace? Yes, he interviewed with me to get into the Reform Center. Right, well, I noticed he never got in, and I was hoping you might give him another chance. I'm afraid he showed no signs of wanting to reform. He only seemed interested in the easier conditions he presumed could be found here. But maybe you could give him one more shot. Horace was in for armed robbery and attempted murder. Giving him another shot would be a risky proposition. I know, but hey, look, I've heard a little about what you can do, about how you do your thing. It's about sending signals, right? And I know what you're saying. Horace seems beyond hope. The messages of this place just wouldn't get through. He doesn't want them to get through. I know, but look, man, you would have to see the shit he went through. I mean, he got it worse than me. No dad, just a bunch of boyfriends that yelled at him, beat him with fists, chairs, the dashboard of the car, and a mom who was flying on crank all the time. There's nothing I can do about that. Yeah, but look, what if you could just, do your thing? Send some of those signals you send, get his brain where it would have been if he had had a great father, a mother who was straight. And then if it don't make no difference, if he's still a hard case, then okay. That would be changing him into a different person. Well, yeah, but a better one. The one he should have been. The one he would have been if he had a real family, like these rich kids. I mean, do you think it's a coincidence they're the minority here? No, but I can't do anything about that. It's not for me to play God. Mike hesitated for a moment. Sure it is. I mean, ain't that what we're supposed to be doing? What Jesus would do? What God would do to do whatever we can? Well, you can do a lot more than the rest of us. Mike, there are lines I dare not cross, and there are others I'm not sure I could cross even if I wanted to. Your request presents both, Joel said. I mean, if I try to improve Horace based on some hypothetical upbringing, who's to say I shouldn't do that for everyone in the world? Mike paused. So why don't you then? Joel felt a swell of pity for Mike and his cousin, but mixed with horror at the thought of manipulating the brains of 7 billion people. He put a hand on Mike's shoulder to comfort him, as he had seen others do, usually on TV. I don't have all the answers about what I can do, and even fewer about what I should do. Until then, I'm not going to mess about in people's brains. Yeah, but... It seemed to Joel that Mike was not going to stop, so he reluctantly turned and walked away. As Mike called after him, Joel felt a strong temptation to turn off his sense of hearing. General Marquez, how should I respond to this message? Carrie asked. For a week, there had been no killing, no raids. Greg had called saying that Dr. Harrington wanted to meet with Carrie and her boss to discuss how to make the peace last and reorganize the country. Carrie sat with the general in an office that looked more like it belonged to an auto body shop manager than the real power behind Bolivia's reinstalled president. Do you want to work with Dr. Harrington on cementing this peace? General Marquez chuckled. There is no peace to cement. This group has put a finger into a hole in the dam. The blood will find another route to flow. As she was saying this, Colonel Carlos de Genes, the general's other second-in-command, came in. You're right, General. These interlopers are just another scourge. Interlopers, Carlos? You mean like me? Carrie asked. De Genes stammered for a moment. You're not an interloper, not anymore. And you were welcomed in during our time of need. And we're still in a time of need, General Marquez replied. I don't understand, General. I thought we were of like minds on this, the Genez said. We are about what will happen if we don't help Dr. Harrington and his troops, Marquez replied. And what if we do succeed in helping them? What is it they're after? He asked. I don't think there's much they could be after here, not anymore. They've come here when no one else has, when it wasn't in their interest to do so, General Marquez said. We don't know that yet. There's the lithium here, and maybe most of the silver is gone by now, but not all of it. And there's always our people to exploit for cheap labor, de Genez said. I don't think so, Carrie said. I saw the look on the faces of those rescuers as they hugged the villagers they had saved. They were genuinely happy. Colonel de Genez looked at the general. Maybe Carrie's right. Maybe this truly is a humanitarian mission. That's all the more reason not to get involved. Humanitarian interventions tend to have a very short expiration date, especially when things get tough. We could end up left high and dry, as the Americans say, just when we need these people the most. They are our only hope, General Marquez replied with a shrug. They might have the power to finally bring peace and prosperity to this country. Call them back and arrange a meeting. All in all, it wasn't bad, Joaquin thought to himself as he surveyed the interlopers. They had taken the time to buy threadbare local clothes, and they had picked all Latinos for the mission. Nevertheless, they might as well have been wearing signs saying, "Look at me." No one grew to over 6 feet around here, and certainly no one had a frame so large that even a shawl couldn't hide it. The spy gave the hand signal. These American invaders had caught them unawares and reckless at the wedding in La Paz. But not this time. And this time they were in Potosi, the highest city in the world, a town of about 175,000 that had once been larger and much wealthier, as the ornate Spanish architecture indicated. The silver from the looming Cerro Rico mountain had made it into the seat of Spanish power in the country, and this town and its nearby mountains still had their uses. He had maintained line of sight with the other spies. The raid was on. In the corner of town farthest from any of the freakish Americans, 5 helicopters swarmed in as if from nowhere, followed post-haste by a group of 20 forasteros on jeeps. The frequent showboating the choppers engaged in was replaced by a lethal focus on any who challenged them. They hovered over the small section of the village for no more than 30 seconds. The raiders and jeeps were just as efficient. Instead of struggling with their choice targets, they immediately shot dead the first 10 women and children who fought, forcing the others into a traumatized submission as their prizes were thrown onto their back seats. The entire raid took less than 3 minutes. The party was over, 50 yards out towards the mountain where the lead driver looked back to see the coward villagers staying in their place, and no sign of the invaders. A smile broke across the driver's face as he turned back around. His countenance didn't even have time to change before a wrenching groan filled his ears from above. He looked up to see an invader leap 50 feet up to rip the rear rotor off a trailing chopper. Still, the now useless chopper kept the attention off him and the other jeeps for a few moments. All Los Forasteros needed to disappear. The CV finished tying up the pilot of the helicopter and prepared to go after the others. A week earlier, he had brought down 3 helicopters, then taken out over a dozen jeeps. He smiled at the thought of taking them back to their makeshift camp where there would be dozens of these captured raiders. Then his stomach sank. The jeeps were gone from even his enhanced sight. Tracks crisscrossed the well-trodden path out toward Cerro Rico, every which way. Many going into numerous tunnels. He had no idea which jeeps had gone into which tunnel and where they led. Kicking at the dirt in frustration, he turned back and headed to the detainee camp, stopping briefly to pick up his lone prisoner. Francesca bent down and swabbed the gel on the bedraggled refugee's forehead. It coagulated instantly. Muy rápido, the woman said sheepishly. You'll have to tell your friends that, Dr. Harrington said, coming up behind Francesca. There's no better advertising than word of mouth. Francesca rolled her eyes at the quip. It's a good thing the doctor's treatments are better than his jokes, Francesca said to the woman in Spanish. Get some rest now. Someone will check on you soon. The woman laid down on the pillow-top hospital bed in the austere but antiseptic and climate-controlled cinder block cabin. Francesca and Dr. Harrington left, being careful not to disturb the sleep of the woman's sole roommate. They walked outside and strolled through the large camp of about a dozen homogeneous buildings. The buzz of generators mixed with the laughter of playing children to produce a symphony of renewal. The pleasant aroma of cheeseburgers and other American-style staples emanated from the hangar-sized mess hall. Children ran in circles around them wearing donated clothing, some hamming it up as they flopped around in intentionally oversized arraignments. The presidential palace was in sight here, in La Paz. Repairs had already begun, and the restored president had already moved in. How are the other camps? Francesca asked. Good. We have well over 100 camps like this one, each spaced about 10 miles apart. 50 are run by us. Another 50 by the Red Cross and other organizations, although we're obviously providing security at all of them. And who are we telling the Red Cross we are? As little as possible. Hired security, and we leave it at that. It wouldn't be the first time outsiders have been hired to provide security in the developing world, or even to win a war. And how about the restored government? Are they prosecuting Los Forasteros, who've assaulted the women? And, for that matter, the abuse by husbands and boyfriends that's been too often ignored in the past? The majority of Los Forasteros have been incarcerated, but the situation here has been chaotic. There have been some prosecutions, but it's difficult to prove much of anything, and that's when the women come forward. Many are afraid we'll abandon them soon after they testify. But isn't that partly our fault? We haven't even declared ourselves openly, and let the people know we're sticking around, Francesca said. The American government has given us some room to operate. When you accept no credit and take all the risk, you can get that sometimes. Declaring ourselves openly could change that equation. Still, Señorita Bonita, Francesca heard. She turned to see a girl of about 10 wearing a light blue dress pointing at her. Muchas gracias, she replied. Her gratitude was replaced with rage as she saw the black eye the girl had suffered. She knelt down and clasped the pretty girl's hand with her mother's approval. You poor thing. Pobrecito, she said to the girl. I'm so sorry. You're safe now, and we're going to do everything we can to help you. She stroked the girl's long black hair as her anger mixed with overwhelming pity. The girl nodded thankfully, but began to cry. I hate them. Los odio, she cried out. I'm going to kill them all someday. Francesca hugged her tightly. Please don't talk that way, mi linda. Don't let your heart be filled with hate. But don't you hate them? Don't you want to kill them? I don't want you to become like me. And then, staring into the girl's eyes, she said, Me convertiría en un demonio para que puedas seguir siendo un ángel. I would become a devil, so you might remain an angel. And with that, kissed the girl on the forehead. Here he is, Randy thought to himself as he crouched down between the finely landscaped bushes. He was within 3 miles of Bedford Stye, but a world away. The house he knelt before was large enough to be a 2-family home, and comfortably at that. Fairly narrow, but with great depth. A closer look revealed just a single family lived there. It wasn't fancy looking on the outside, just a simple red brick colonial, but it was still impressive. It was located in the Gravesend section of Brooklyn, a name that normally provided prestige, but today it would just prove fitting, Randy thought. This house was the spoils from Skip Carter's rich new drug territory. Randy's old one. Business had been good for Skip and his fellow Suede Bullets since the community volunteers had come along and focused way more on the Knights than their main rival. Hell, those motherfuckers had created a safe environment for these Wall Street bitches to get their coke in Bedford Stye. So not only did Skip get his old territory when all the Knights got pinched, but business was better than ever. Here, daylight was the Bullets' cover. Skip would have had at least 2 armed guards with him at night. But with the noonday sun high overhead, Skip was stepping out in his satin warm-ups. A look of disbelief registered on the Suede Bullet's face as the first 3 bullets ripped through his chest. It's those damn vigilantes' fault, Randy thought to himself as his enemy fell. They're the fools who made me this desperate. As blood began to trickle onto the sidewalk, Randy heard the sharp sound of plastic wheels rolling. He whipped around. A man of about 35 had tripped on his son's toy car. The man was now scrambling to his feet, but he was only 30 feet away from the barrel of the still smoking gun that was aimed right at his head. Raising his hands in the air, the unwilling witness cried, "I didn't see anything. I won't say anything. Please, don't shoot." Randy did not lower the gun. "All the same, I'm afraid I can't take no chances on your fingers doing some walking, boy. Thank the CVs for that." There were plenty of bullets left. Francesca and Dr. Harrington entered the main hall of the presidential palace through thick oak doors. About 20 initiates milled about the marble inlaid hall. Demetrius entered from a back room. "How is our mission going?" Dr. Harrington asked him. "Mixed. The camps and the routes between them are well protected. All ambush attempts have failed miserably. But some of the Forasteros raids continue to have some success. Sometimes we catch a chopper or a jeep or two, but the rest manage to escape." "Do we know how?" "They have pre-planned escape routes. They make good use of the nearby mountains and caves." "We can't just follow them in." "We do when we can, but there are extensive tunnels built that scatter in many different directions, as do the Forasteros who use them." Dr. Harrington pondered a moment. "Well, you'll be glad to hear that I brought some trackers down then. Using them is taking a risk with our government friends back home, but a risk we'll have to take at this point. Is there anything else?" "Yes, I am afraid we aren't managing to get much information from the detainees. A lot of them are just kids who've been brutalized themselves and don't know much. The more senior soldiers mock us. They say our prisons with their padded beds are more comfortable than the ones in their homes ever were. They ask us if they'll get to take the air conditioner home when they leave. The prison even has a nickname." "What's that?" "The Bob Mahal." Dr. Harrington shook his head in disgust. "Sir, should we get a little rougher, I assure you we could get them to give some useful information instead of wisecracks." "No, forget that," Dr. Harrington replied without hesitation. "The only reason our government has let us stay is because of the ethical way we've conducted this operation." Just then, another CV approached. "Dr. Harrington, General Marquez is here," he said. Francesca had heard of the impending meetup and had slipped on a slinky red number. The general entered the hall now, preceded by a couple of soldiers, a man and a woman side by side. Francesca guessed from his shadow the general stood a good 6 feet, with close-cropped hair. And then Marquez came into view. Francesca was more than a little surprised. "You're a woman," she said. Marquez grabbed at her breasts quizzically for a moment. "I am? Hey, what do you know?" She walked past Francesca with a pat on her shoulder. Demetrius noted the woman's strong features, her hook nose, peppered gray hair, a face that looked more wizened than aged. Most of all, Demetrius noticed her proud bearing, a countenance that was unfazed by her elite company, and it annoyed him. "Dr. Harrington," the general said as she strode up with her 2 officers at her side. "Your soldiers are as powerful as a pack of rampaging llamas, and almost as hard to spot." In the blink of an eye, Demetrius traversed the 5 feet that separated him from the male soldier next to the general, and effortlessly picked him up by the throat with one hand. Carrie immediately trained her Beretta on him. Demetrius ignored her. He looked into the phlegmatic eyes of the general. "What's wrong, General? Didn't you spot me? Speaking of which, your help has been hard to spot." Dr. Harrington was genuinely appalled. "Demetrius, put him down immediately!" The initiate complied and put the male officer down gruffly. The gun remained fixed upon him. "That's a nice gun," Demetrius said to the young woman. 100 rounds from it could do some real damage to me. You might get off 2 before I implant it into your skull." She kept the gun trained on him. "If General Marquez's involvement so far has been hard to spot, that has been out of necessity," Dr. Harrington said. "General Diaz's betrayal was so great, his control so complete. It had made frontal assaults impossible, but Marquez and her dozens of raids have saved more lives in Bolivia than anyone, including us. And that's Carrie Berman you're threatening, who left a comfortable life in Canada and took her special forces training to help the people of Bolivia." The soldier Demetrius had assaulted straightened out the collar of his beige t-shirt, but made no move to check his throat. "But we can't win this war without help," General Marquez said to Demetrius. "Can you admit the same?" "I don't know that we need help, and even if we did, who would you be to give it to us?" "A very smart and capable woman," Dr. Harrington interjected. "Luckily, I've dealt with a lot of smart and capable women in my career." "And I've dealt with a lot of patronizing men in my career, so it sounds like we're both in good shape," General Marquez replied. Look, Dr. Harrington," Demetrius said as Carrie finally lowered her gun. "I know we've had some problems, and we'd be happy to have help from someone as capable as General Marquez, but I think the new devices will keep our quarry from escaping next time." "Ah yes, the tracking devices like the ones you supplied back in New York?" General Marquez said. Demetrius and Dr. Harrington glanced at each other. "What? Do you think you're the only one who does their research?" General Marquez said to Dr. Harrington. "But those devices are of little use without reconnaissance. As much as we do appreciate what you've done already, you need our help to do more." "What did you have in mind?" Dr. Harrington asked. Chief Malone shook her head as she sat reading the news online. "What is it?" Joe, the deputy commissioner, asked. "Witness to a night's murder got shot on the spot." "He was afraid the guy was going to call the community volunteers, wasn't he?" "That's what's suspected," Malone replied. "So are these clowns doing more harm than good?" "It depends on who you ask and what you ask." "Like if you ask the Suede Bullets or the Knights?" "That's one example. They have gotten more witnesses to testify, ones who otherwise would have been too afraid. And we do get a lot of mysterious leads since the CVs have been around. Crime is down in the Knights' territory, but it's going back up in other parts of the city." "Like the ones the Suede Bullets control," Joe replied, "especially drug dealing. The criminals are evolving, aren't they?" Juanita nodded. "Our friend's plan was flawed from the start. He figured if he took away witnesses' fears, most of them would testify. But sometimes there is no witness. Sometimes the witness sympathizes with the criminal, and sometimes they just don't give a shit." "The Suede Bullets don't go after witnesses, it seems, and it's working for them. So are they the kinder, gentler drug gang?" In response, Chief Malone pulled a file from her drawer, from which she took a photo that she handed to Joe. The photo was of a young man of about 18 years old. His lips were a grayish blue, his jaw clenched, his dark skin a horrible pallor. Joe immediately recognized the signs of an opiate overdose. A tag at the top of the file noted, "Deceased." "Lawrence Barkley," Juanita said. "The first kid in his family to ever attend college. Straight A student, full scholarship to NYU. He went to an off-campus party with the wrong kids, took the wrong drug, a free sample from one of the Bullets dealers, heroin laced with fentanyl. And it was the first time he ever tried drugs so far as we can tell. The dad somehow got me on the phone this morning." Joe didn't need ask how that call went, having been on way too many of them himself. Distraught, beside himself, heartbroken, none of the descriptions would do a parent's reaction justice in any case. "So yeah," Juanita simply said, her words trailing off as her eyes seemed to well up slightly. She had a son about Lawrence's age, Joe remembered. "It's too bad the last DA shut the DNA tracking program," Joe finally said after a long silence. "Back when the trackers were anonymously handed over to the police, it was working better, wasn't it?" They were both reminded of how the DA only shut down the program right after it helped get him into the governor's mansion. Chief Malone detailed how criminals were also adjusting to the DNA trackers, and the complementary microscopic surveillance devices Dr. Harrington hadn't acknowledged bringing back. "Maybe the new DA would play ball with us, and Dr. Harrington would hand over the trackers again," Joe continued. "I think even bringing it up could open a can of worms," Chief Malone replied. "Lead to the new DA discovering how we got all those convictions from the last iteration of the program. No, the less he knows about it, the better." "What if you just ask the CVs to leave, publicly? If you don't think they're helping anymore, maybe they would go if you let them know that, and they could leave the trackers behind on the down low." "They might, in which case I can tell you who's going to get blamed the first time a witness gets killed." "It might be a lot easier on you if they left on their own, wouldn't it?" It would, Chief Malone replied, looking pensive for a moment. They were back in Potosi. General Marquez stood on the outskirts with a dozen of her soldiers spread throughout the edges of the city. She had gotten a tip that Los Forasteros were coming, and now she was looking for someone different in the homogeneous crowd, someone who was trying too hard to blend in. That is why she and her troops were here, even though 100 of them were no match for one of the CVs. After about 5 minutes, she thought she had found what she was looking for. A man of about 25 was implicating himself in a series of ways. Marquez had first noted how the man had noted her with a seemingly feigned indifference. Her trained eye also noted that the American clothing he wore, a rare commodity in itself, was a little too big, and his blue t-shirt was somewhat stretched at the neck, as if it had been taken by force. There were others, a young man who actually had to look at a menu in a cafe filled with locals. Still another who kept lingering at a bar reading a newspaper, though the young man had a smartphone bulging in his pocket. Marquez slipped trackers onto all of them, and then she waited. The general had witnessed dozens of these raids, but she had never gotten used to them, and she hoped she never would. Right on cue, Los Forasteros came into her ostensibly unprotected section of town, giving her the same knot in her stomach fueled by rage and frustration she had felt countless other times. Here, during this first phase of the operation, she was to remain a mere observer, tripping the silent alarm in her pocket to alert the CVs. Things didn't remain silent for long. The general turned and saw the first of the CVs. She was quite a sight. Bursting into the clearing, she chased down a perfectly functional Jeep, as if the vehicle had 2 flat tires. In one smooth motion, she reached down and grabbed the rear bumper of the Jeep, flipping it 10 feet up and forward as one might flip a flimsy card table. It slammed back down onto its roof in a flurry of swirling dust and cracked bones. The ruffians were bound within 30 seconds. It was all the motivation the other forasteros needed to disappear, or so they thought. Marquez pulled the tracker from her pocket as she saw one of the spies flee with the raiders. A steady red light moved across a map of the area just above zoom in and zoom out buttons. She walked over to the young Asian woman who had bound the forasteros. She was now joined by 5 compatriots, who helped hold back an angry crowd. A dozen of her own soldiers were on their way. The whole team had arrived now, her soldiers on jeeps as well, the CVs on foot, now led by Greg. He handed General Marquez a rapid-fire tranquilizer gun. Marquez put her hand up in the sign of refusal. "I stopped playing with toy guns when I was still in Mary Jane's," she said. "You're going to use regular bullets?" Greg asked. "I'd have to get that cleared by Dr. Harrington." "You do that, young man," the general replied. "I'd like to know if I need to apologize for ignoring his order." Greg did not crack a smile, but he did take the tranquilizer gun back. Marquez saw that the group of forasteros led by native troops had again fled to the tunnels of Cerro Rico. 5 minutes later, they found themselves outside the myriad entrances of the mining mountain. General Marquez showed Los Forasteros going hither and yon on her tracker through the various tunnels as they purposely spread out to lead the CVs astray. Marquez, however, had trained in these tunnels. She had taught her troops to trap enemies in these mountains. She knew which tunnels led to dead ends, which led to narrow ledges, and which led to kill zones perfect for an ambush. She took them into an utterly dark passage. They switched on their flashlights. Using the tracking devices as their guide, they walked through an incomprehensibly complex labyrinth, with tunnels heading off in every direction. Dozens led to towns miles away from the camp they sought. Dozens more led to nowhere. Only one led to the goal. Utter darkness saturated any part not hit by the flashlights, including sharp rocky protrusions that hung from the uneven roofs of the tunnels. A few sharp scrapes slowed their progress, as did the mysterious objects they stepped on. Some squealed when tread upon, others crunched, while still others crawled over their ankles. Pointing the light toward their feet was a distraction they were happy to avoid. Eventually, the CVs picked up the sound of voices. As they kept walking, the CVs could tell the rumbling was voices coming from about a half-mile away. When they were about 100 yards away, Marquez sent Carrie up ahead. She returned 3 minutes later with a rundown on the upcoming battle arena. The tunnel opened onto an outcropping the size and dimension of a football field, 1,000 feet or so up in the mountains. A combination of natural and man-made stone barriers covered the camp on all sides, including a massive stone overhang that covered the bulk of the area. The hole they'd be coming out of was no more than 3 feet wide by 6 feet high. Many boulders also dotted the field, large enough to stand behind. The soldiers carried Kalashnikovs, and piles of ammunition were spread on the ground. Some looked like they had grayish-white tips. "Tungsten," General Marquez said without hesitation. "Harder than steel. Armor-piercing." "How many of those can you survive again?" General Marquez asked Greg Riley as they moved forward. Greg was in the lead and about to move out of the narrow exit of the tunnel when Marquez ducked in front of him. Rolling onto her back with adroit grace and speed, she ducked her upper body into the clearing, then fired 2 rounds into the forehead of the soldier she correctly surmised would be leaning over a drilled hole of the overhang, then whipped back inside. The man dropped dead, falling 10 feet from his perch. "I would have been okay," Greg said tersely as the group stood pressed with their backs flat against the wall. "I figured that. They might have figured the same thing and waited for my tender noggin to come through. But I'd be happy for you to take the lead now," she said, motioning toward the gunfire that was already streaming in through the entranceway, inches in front of them. Marquez saw the young man analyzing the angles of the streams of bullets for a moment. Greg reached forward with his special gun, his back to the wall, cocked his wrist to the left, and without seeing the battlefield fired at least 10 rounds, all within 2 seconds. Marquez could hear bodies hitting the ground, followed by backward scrambling. A moment after the gunfire paused, Greg and the other CVs rushed through the hole in the wall. The hail of tungsten-capped bullets returned immediately. A sound as sharp as hail on a tin roof echoed with each hit. Marquez could not help but admire their bravery and skill as the CVs fired back, ducking out from behind the exit. The general saw Greg taking out their enemies with a wide sweep of his arm. They fell so quickly it looked as though a giant invisible wrecking ball was crashing into them from the side instead of individual darts hitting them from the front. It was over within 2 minutes. The forasteros stuck out in the open had been felled first, while the ones who could have held out behind the boulders had an easy decision between going to a prison with merciful conditions by surrendering to the CVs, or risking a merciless bullet from their more familiar enemies. Marquez looked and saw that a bruise on one of the CV's cheekbones that had been a dark black and blue had already faded to a faint brown. Nevertheless, she had no doubt the hit had been painful. The general went up to Greg and shook his hand firmly, passing her thanks along to him and the others. 2 of Marquez's own men had been injured, one in the calf and another on the side of his stomach. The grazing nature of the wounds had not been dumb luck. Her troops had known enough to place the parts that kept them alive firmly behind the CVs. The healthy soldiers attended to the freed women and children and called back to headquarters for more resources. Through it all, Greg stared at the ammunition stockpiles. Marquez's troops confirmed some of the rounds were tipped with tungsten. "You know, Greg," Marquez said to him, "I think this is going to be the beginning of a beautiful friendship." "We definitely seem to have some good synergy, ma'am," Greg replied. Marquez chuckled. "Maybe that's what Bogey meant to say." "Bogey, General? Is that one of your men?" No, never mind." "Is this a recent development?" Greg asked, holding one of the tungsten-tipped bullets. "It is," Marquez replied. "There weren't that many," Greg said. "Why didn't they use more of them? And where did they get the armor-piercing bullets they did use?" "Now you're asking the right questions." "So what now?" "Now I do a little digging. This is where I can bring some synergy," Marquez said with a smile. George Burnson picked up the ringing cell phone that sat next to his office phone. It was Ron Guerin. "Where are we at with the poison for the CVs?" Burnson asked. "There's nothing in the files about what toxin would work on them. There's a lot of stuff about how their bodies have been designed to be immune to poisons," Ron said. "What does it say in summary?" "It says poisons won't work at all. Interestingly, though, while common toxins were always ineffective, there were a few that would have worked until last year." "What happened last year?" "Demetrius and crew had a cantankerous meeting with Mr. Singer." "That's right," Dr. Burnson replied reflectively. "One involving poisonous barbs the good doctor didn't anticipate." "Exactly. Soon after that, all the kids got a shot that made their supposedly immutable bodies reject all poisons. What did the summary say exactly? There was a pause as Ron scanned the documents. Hang on. Let me see here. It says that all poisons will fail because the changes in cell membrane receptors ensure that no toxin can enter and inhibit normal neurological or muscular functioning. So, there you have it. George laughed lightly. You're not reading between the lines, my friend. I think I can come up with something effective, and Bob has hinted at how to do it. That's good to hear. Now, I just have to let Bob know we're close to coming up with the poison, Ron replied. If that's some sort of odd joke, I don't think... Trust me. I don't... Burnson realized he was talking to a dial tone. Tina rushed to the heavy gunmetal gray steel door. It was the opening to a new addition to the Reform Center that from the outside looked like an aircraft hangar. She was surprised to find the door unlocked. Opening it just a crack, Tina found her senses overwhelmed and her mind baffled. In the dimly lit room, she saw a huge metal sphere, the size of an elephant, about 100 yards away. It was being violently manipulated. The object flattened, spreading 30 yards in each direction, then divided into 100 orbs that bobbed and whirled in a coordinated dance. The orbs continued to join and separate, changing in size, shape, and composition. Tina stepped in farther to look for Joel. Her side vision momentarily caught a glimpse of a humongous, undulating mass the size of a 2-story building, with fleshy and bony protrusions that shot out, then retracted just as quickly. Tina saw now that the air was distorted between the thing and the sphere, as waves of invisible but powerful energy warped the air with precision. She had not looked at the dimly lit beast for even 2 seconds before the lights flooded the room with a loud click. A startled Joel was standing there in a simple black t-shirt and a pair of jeans, eyes locked on Tina. The sphere was lowered to the floor slowly, but she could feel the rubberized floor sink beneath its mass when it touched. She noticed now that Joel's clothing seemed to have an odd texture to it, somewhere between felt and fur. What is it? Joel asked. There was an awkward pause for a few moments until it became obvious that neither wanted to address what she had just witnessed. Sorry to interrupt you. It's Hal. He's having convulsions. 2 minutes later, they were there in the well-equipped medical facility that contained 10 beds. The prisoner was writhing and howling in pain as sweat poured down his pale face. The storm of electrical activity that Joel felt assured him that this was no ruse. He touched Hal on the forehead, and 2 seconds later, the spasm ceased. The prisoner looked up with an expression of shock that soon turned to anger. What was that all about? He asked tersely. I shut down the convulsions. Joel replied. Yeah, I know. I mean, how did you stop him, and why did I have to go through them in the first place? That which we gain too easily, we esteem too lightly. In this case, your freedom from heroin. We esteem too what? Did you just make that shit up? What the fuck is that supposed to mean? No, I didn't just make it up. It means that if you got to stop using heroin without any withdrawal symptoms, it might not be a big deal for you to start using it again. Oh, so now you're deciding when I should suffer and when I shouldn't, huh? You're making judgment calls on that shit? Yes. Just like I made a judgment call on whether you stay here or go back to Attica. Hey, now. Joel put his hand up. I don't mean to threaten. I'm just trying to do what's best here. If you sometimes disagree with what I do, believe me, you have plenty of company. Hal stood angry and baffled as his warden patted him on the shoulder and left. A call came in as Dr. Harrington was about to board his flight. Seeing it was Ron, he stifled his instinct to send the call to voicemail. I know you're in a crowded airport, so this will be a quick yes or no question, and I'm sure the answer will be yes. Okay. Our researchers inadvertently came up with a poison that works on the initiates while doing additional research on Penivate. Dr. Harrington immediately understood. It targets high-consumption cells just like Penivate. In this case, the initiates high-consumption cells instead of cancerous cells. Right. I was going to have them destroy the compound and all associated research, but I just wanted to confirm with you. There was a pause. How many people know about this? Ron, Francesca Johansson is here to see you, but you have that appointment with Merrill Lynch in 5 minutes, Ron's assistant said into the loudspeaker. Cancel the Merrill appointment, he responded. They just came from across town. Miss Johansson came from 4,000 miles away. Moments later, Francesca entered, resplendent in a silky black dress. Francesca, what a pleasant surprise. Please, tell me your visit indicates that the women and children of Bolivia are safe, and so are their rights. She did not bother sitting down. Not yet, but maybe you can help me in that regard. Ron chuckled. I'm not sure about that. If 2,000 superpowered soldiers are having trouble, I doubt that one blowhard lawyer can turn the tide. That's not the kind of help I was looking for. We are making progress in Bolivia, but we'd be making more if Robert would listen to me more. We've got a problem with this General Marquez. What kind of problem? Francesca explained to Ron the problems with the general not accepting her demands on law and order and granting reduced punishment and even amnesty to soldiers who had committed crimes against women and children in return for switching to her side. She sees our instructions as optional, a view I can't broker. A view you can't broker, but Bob can. Is that the problem? I just thought you could talk some sense into him. I think I can do that. For now. But neither of us is going to be satisfied with just having the good doctor's ear. Not long term, anyway. Especially when others are starting to carry some weight with him. No, it's time to go beyond picking up the scraps from his table. What are you talking about? I'm talking about my taking over No-Tech, the CVs, and a hell of a lot of the world's wealth and power. Francesca stared in disbelief. Wait, are you joking? Ron shook his head. I was asking for a little help with a problem. Nothing like what you're talking about. You're crazy for thinking you can pull such a plan off, and you're crazy for telling me about it. What's to keep me from telling Robert? Francesca looked around as she finished speaking. There's no one behind you. I'm not worried about you telling anyone of my plans. Why not? What makes you trust me? I trust you the same as I trust anyone. I trust you to follow your own self-interests. How do you know what my self-interests are? I'm No-Tech's primary negotiator. It's my job to know things. Like, you are keeping this little meeting a secret from Bob, for example. Fair enough, but who's to say I'm only motivated by self-interest? Ron smiled but did not immediately respond. Dr. Harrington loves his Plato and Kierkegaard, but personally, I'm more of a Nietzsche fan. He laid out the truth, that every action is selfish and that altruism is an odd type of masochism. After all, we can never actually experience life as anyone but ourselves. Yes, but he said we can be selfishly noble, and we can make ourselves feel good by helping others. Noble? Is that what Bob's quest is? He certainly hasn't done it for the accolades. He's avoided publicity as much as possible. And so the martyr gets to pat himself on the back all the harder, Ron said. You expect me to betray a man who's justifiably proud of doing right for a greedy traitor like you? Francesca replied. Yes. For one thing, because you want what's best for the world. And Dr. Roberts' mission isn't what's best for it? Francesca asked. Ron did not answer the question directly. A quest to save the world using kids with jacked-up chromosomes? Every scenario leads to disaster. And under all those scenarios, he takes me down with him, to jail or death. All but one, that is. Francesca thought for a moment. All but the scenario where you're the one controlling how the mission goes haywire, she finally responded. Ron nodded. Just who betrayed whom first? He asked rhetorically. You have a point, Francesca acknowledged. Ron shrugged. I'm not the most moral man, but I am a practical man, and that is the better way to be. After all, what is goodness but selfishness with a long-term view? You see no goodness in Dr. Harrington? Idealists who want to shape the world to fit their vision have a pretty bad track record in history. Hitler, Lenin, the Founding Fathers? Francesca interjected. Hardly, Ron scoffed. Our founders, more than anyone, didn't want any one person to have the power to dominate our country. regardless of how benevolent he saw himself. Why else would they have designed a government guaranteed to end up in gridlock 90% of the time? Look at Alexander Hamilton, the man who set up our financial system, the most successful in the history of the world. He designed the entire framework of our economy so that self-interest would be its driving force. No, the Founding Fathers were the ultimate pragmatists. But what about the good Robert has done? It will continue. That's my whole point. Are you worried about no-tech's medical advances being halted? They will be my greatest revenue stream. Are you worried about me doing harm to this country? It will be my top market. What about getting medications to the poor? What about the protection he has provided? Ron paused. Those who can pay for our medications will pay. Those who can't will get their governments to pay for them. And those same governments will pay dearly not to get involved in the world's hotspots. They'll pay dearly for medicine or intervention once widespread tragedy or atrocities have occurred, you mean? Francesca replied. It might take the deaths of thousands or even millions before they pay the price you want. That's some god-awful blackmail. Ron tisked. Every negotiation consists of 2 or more parties trying to blackmail each other. In polite company, we call it leverage, Ron replied. Francesca sat silent. Believe me, it's better if I win, Ron said in a soft voice. Compassion fatigues. Ideals corrupt. But self-interest never wanes, never degrades. So you would have me live as a criminal? Ron smirked. Do you know how you can tell if someone is a bad criminal? He paused. If they are publicly known as a criminal. The best criminals don't run and hide from the system. They are the system. They get to decide who is and isn't a criminal. That's how it'll be with us. So what do you offer me? Francesca finally replied. The chance to rule by your side instead of Dr. Harrington's? Ron shook his head emphatically. Rule the world? Why? So I can get grief about how old hags will pay for their prescriptions? No. I want to live above the law, not to create it. I want to dictate when it benefits me. Otherwise, I want to be left alone so I can spend my billions. I offer you a measure of the same money and power I will have, along with freedom from the problems they usually bring. Or you can use them to treat your pet causes. He made you what you are today, Francesca said after some thought. And I him, Ron replied without hesitation. I took him from being a kid who got picked last in gym class to being the most powerful man in the world. And now he thinks he'll have me at his beck and call for life because he's handy with test tubes? He's in for a surprise. What do you have planned for him? I think a chairman emeritus role would suit Bob well. Eventually, he'll think so himself. You'll see. This is all neither here nor there, Francesca said. What chance do you have against him? Just one of the CVs could kill you in his sleep, and add to that the scientific knowledge you don't have. Ron paused. Do you really think power has anything to do with how powerful you are, personally? With your body? Mao Zedong once said that power comes from the barrel of a gun. What did he mean exactly? This statement was coming from a frumpy middle-aged man. Just one of his millions of soldiers could have shot or beaten him to death. He invented none of the weapons his army used. And yet, he took over and ruled the largest country on Earth, killing 50 million people in the process. How? By using his gun? No. By controlling the millions of men who wielded guns in his name. It is the man who can see and manipulate the big picture who has real power. Power enough to keep Joel from interfering? Francesca asked. Don't forget what he can do. Ron nodded. That kid can change the fabric of reality itself, but in the end, he will be nothing more than a treasure trove of secrets to be plundered. What is it you have planned, specifically? We derive no benefit from you knowing specifics. Does that mean you have no specifics? Francesca asked. Ron smiled. You will soon get a taste of what I can do already. And I'm just getting warmed up. So what do I do? You will help me save Bob from himself. After all, if you get people killed in the name of a good cause that can't succeed, then it was never a good cause in the first place. What would you have me do, for starters? For starters, you will help me get rid of that thorn in our side, Marquez. That shouldn't be too much of a burden for you. And then what? And then you can send in my lunch date. Demetrius has come back for some home cooking. It wasn't much of a soccer stadium. It was a quarter the size of any arena in Europe. The concrete and the pillars had crumbled in spots, exposing the steel bracing rods underneath. The field in the center on which the 12-year-old boys were playing was more bare dirt than grass. Greg's enhanced senses picked up the scent of old urine, not quite eradicated by disinfectant. Still, as Dr. Harrington expressed to Greg as he sat down next to him on the concrete bench, it was a beautiful sight. "Do you know what this stadium was used for 2 months ago?" Dr. Harrington asked. Just as the question was asked, Greg saw another call come in from the Secretary of Defense. Dr. Harrington, the Secretary... It was used to sell off women and children as slaves. And you'd be surprised from how far away buyers came. Men from the Middle East, looking for young camel jockeys. Tech tycoons from Bangalore, with a relative that needed a new liver. American businessmen looking for a free maid, all thinking they were under the radar. And of course, with the women and girls and many of the boys also, well, you know. I do know, sir, but this is the third time the Secretary has called, not to mention over 5 other calls from his staff in the past 2 days. He's threatening to send a contingent to bring you back if you don't speak with him immediately. Is that right? Did he leave a number with you? I have him on the line now, Greg said as he pulled the satellite phone from his pocket. Dr. Harrington took the phone as Greg took his leave. Secretary Romwell, it's a pleasure to hear from you. I'm surprised to hear that, considering you haven't returned a number of calls from me and my staff. I was hoping to have more information for you on these raids we are now stopping. I was in the process of gathering that information. You're not stopping all of them. Dozens have been killed in the last 2 weeks alone, and these guerrilla tactics General Mesclan is now resorting to are more brutal than ever. We're not sure you're actually helping. We are. General Diaz killed thousands wresting control from the country. The losses taking it back have been minimal. Our involvement is what's generating the publicity. Exactly. It was just another civil skirmish in a country most Americans couldn't find on a map until you showed up and people wanted to know who the hell these freelancers were taking on an army. We've had to come up with more bullshit stories than a pilot who comes home with lipstick on his collar and tequila on his breath. We're about done covering your ass on this. Covering my ass? I've been the one covering for the U.S., for the whole world for that matter, in stopping these atrocities. All I'm asking for is a little more time and a little slack. You're damn near out of both. And what's with this messing about with the Bolivian justice system? No one asked you to do that. Well, actually, frankly, we've let you get away with too much already, and I can only hope we can repair the damage you've done to this administration. I hope so too. I'm sure the 11 million people of Bolivia will be glad to hear you were willing to put up with a little bad PR to spare their lives. I'd try to avoid oversimplifying if I were you. That's how you got into this mess in the first place. Now, here are some changes you need to make. Sorry, Mr. Secretary, you're breaking up. Damn, third world technology. Greg frowned as Wesley Gordon practically strutted down the Bronx courthouse steps. Thanks to a mixture of changing politics and the inevitable backlash to so many young men being sent to prison, many of the folks the initiates were helping put in jail weren't staying very long. In this case, one of the knights. Wesley had beaten an immigrant store owner during a robbery, leaving him with a concussion and a broken eye socket, but was let out after 2 weeks regardless. Man, that's gotta hurt, Greg heard a voice say behind him. It was Gary Morris, leader of the Suede Bullets. I mean, he could have killed that guy, and he only got 2 weeks? Your crew was guarding that witness around the clock, too, weren't you? Frustrating, but hey, Greg, I know who you are, Greg replied curtly. Oh, okay, well, since we're all familiar and everything, maybe you can give me a call the next time you need a new car or a new way to handle situations like this, Gary said, motioning toward Wesley, who was still there on the steps laughing with some fellow knights. Gary handed Greg his card from his ostensibly legitimate car dealership. Greg did not take the card. I'm not looking for a new car, Gary, or a new partner, and we've already got your number. Oh, you do? Huh. Sneaky, sneaky. Don't remember handing that out before. But hey, look, Gary said, lowering his voice. We both know who got your boss's little crime-fighting adventure started here. And it wasn't the bullets. I'd spell it out for you, but hell, they might just change their name again. What's your point? This way you go about things, guarding witnesses around the clock, it's very time and resource intensive, isn't it? I mean, you guys do get paid, don't you? We get paid. Oh yeah? How much? Greg just glared in response. Okay, Gary said. But your methods aren't always very effective either, are they? I mean, never mind our friend there going home free right now. Did you hear about that witness in Brooklyn getting clipped on the spot last week? I heard about it. We have our suspicions about who it was pulling the trigger, but that information you get from witnesses and those little devices you aren't going to admit to having, they could help us help you with more permanent solutions. Oh, what do you mean by that, Gary? Gary wouldn't take the bait. Let's just say you aren't the only ones who can help the Knights drive badly in Brooklyn. I'm not sure what you mean. Okay, so be that way. But how does the old expression go? The enemy of my enemy is... Gary was, of course, looking for the old Sanskrit proverb, since repeated ad nauseum, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But Greg was not about to let him have the satisfaction. I think it goes, sometimes the enemy of my enemy is just another drug-dealing scumbag. Gary was not easily prodded either. That must have been it, he replied with a calm smile. Now don't go forgetting my number, and tell Bob I said hi, he said, as he winked goodbye. Interesting, Carrie heard General Marquez say as she entered her office. What's interesting? Carrie asked. Marquez went on to detail what her investigation into the tungsten-tipped bullets had revealed. Her probe had taken a circuitous route, but she had tracked the bullets back to New York City and a gang called the Knights. Getting those bullets to Bolivia sounds a little higher up the food chain than what a street gang handles. Usually it is. My contacts thought so too. It turns out they've been dealing with a more upscale client than usual. Marquez's agent heard from a mole in the Knights, a gang who had many run-ins with these CVs up north. He hasn't met this client, but he's been there during a cash drop-off. The client comes personally? Carrie asked. Marquez nodded. I think he likes his chances of staying anonymous better, doing drop-offs in Brooklyn than wiring traceable money from Midtown. He didn't count on me knowing so many lowlifes. So who is this client? Ron Guerin, head counsel for NoTech. Carrie gasped. Are you sure? Marquez explained how a picture had been sent to the contact and he had confirmed the identity. He said he can sneak a cell phone movie of Ron meeting with the Knight's leader within the week. Good, Carrie replied simply. We've run into some good luck here, Marquez said. I have a feeling we've narrowly avoided a real catastrophe. Just then the phone rang and Marquez picked up. She didn't speak for a minute, then simply said, Okay, I'll be there. That was Francesca. I guess Dr. Harrington is out of the country. There's been an incursion of forasteros into the Salt Flats region. I'm going to check it out along with a CV or two. Fine, I'll go get my stuff, Carrie said as she turned to go. General Marquez grabbed her arm. Why don't you sit this one out? She said. Francesca left her wood cabin and found General Marquez looking down on the Salar de Uyuni. The Salar was the world's largest salt flat, over 4,000 square miles. Now, during the rainy season especially, the Salar was a breathtaking sight. The moisture in the air turned the Salar into a giant mirror, as the beautiful blue sky and cumulus clouds above appeared just as deeply below. The Salar also held 70% of the world's lithium reserves, over 9 million tons, making it extremely valuable to General Mesclan and his possible, but as yet unidentified, foreign backers. Francesca had been sent as Dr. Harrington's liaison to assess if General Marquez needed further resources for the defense of Uyuni, the small, dusty town that served tourists on their way to the salt flats. She walked out with a glass of white wine for each of them, a respite from the anxiety of the coming fight. The break for Marquez would be longer, however, as her glass contained a powerful but undetectable poison. "Beautiful sight, isn't it?" Francesca said as she approached. General Marquez nodded. "Too bad it inspires so much ugliness," she replied. "Do you need our trackers to locate Mezclan's men?" Marquez shook her head. "These mendejos couldn't be any easier to track if they all had 20-mile-long shits dragging out of their asses," she said. "Will there be a preemptive attack then?" "Oh, a preemptive attack?" General Marquez replied. "We've had 30 centuries worth of those here. They haven't preempted much, I'm afraid. So we'll wait for them to come our way." "Speaking of people coming your way," Francesca said, "I heard about Colonel Umberto defecting to your side." General Marquez frowned. "I presume you aren't passing along your congratulations." She was referring to a good number of Umberto's troops, including forasteros, who had allegedly been involved in sexually assaulting women and children and selling them into slavery. "Don't you think he's coming over because he sees the writing on the wall, that his side is on its way to losing either way? Which means, why do we need to provide him concessions in the first place?" General Marquez gave her a sympathetic look. "You've done good work. And not just here. I read about your work you did reducing genital mutilations in Africa." "I didn't know you were a fan." "I am. And I know that anything less than full and immediate prosecution of a man like Umberto disgusts you like it disgusts me. I just wish we didn't have to make the compromises we do." "Do you anymore?" "Yes. I have to prepare for when you are no longer here. I suppose you think that makes me as ugly as this war." "I think you're beautiful. Inside and—" General Marquez put up her hand. "I know what my strengths are, and what they aren't. I wouldn't have lived this long if I deluded myself. Not being a beauty growing up, people didn't take much interest in me. But that gave me the freedom to be interested instead." "Interested in what?" "In anything that could make me better, make this country better." "And you have. You're a truly great woman." Marquez chuckled. "Some women are born great. Some have greatness thrust upon them. And some get their chance at it when the 3 generals above them get a bullet to the brain in the Plaza Murillo." Francesca put the glasses of wine down on a nearby bench. "No, you were already great. And you got some help in that regard, didn't you? Someone who recognized your greatness at a young age?" Francesca was referring to Manuel Alvarez, a major Bolivian drug lord who, despite his many crimes, would serve as a patron for promising young Bolivians. He had taken an interest in Marquez when she was a teenager, and sent her to Hotchkiss boarding school in Connecticut, and then Dartmouth. "Yes, of course, Mr. Alvarez, you must have done some digging. I don't think he shows up on my Wikipedia page." "Not if you could help it, I'd imagine. I have plenty of things I'd just as soon leave off my Wikipedia page as well. Should I achieve that level of fame someday." The women shared a laugh. "I didn't know I was compromising myself when it came to Alvarez. I was told he was a coffee baron," Marquez said. "When did you find out that wasn't true?" "It was true," Marquez said with a shrug. "Alvarez was a coffee baron. He was making so much money selling cocaine he had to launder it through every legitimate business he could. But coffee was his favorite. I remember him taking me high into the Andes in the Caranavi province, where the best, most flavorful Arabica beans grow. But they require more time and patience. He showed me how to spot beans with just the right shade of red at the peak of ripeness. How to spot even the smallest, boring holes an insect may have left." A sad smile broke on her face as she reminisced. "Perhaps it was that meticulousness that made him so successful selling cocaine," Francesca said. "Perhaps," Marquez replied matter-of-factly. "I'm glad he supported you. I'm glad he helped you develop yourself. But not all women and children have an Alvarez to protect them." Marquez didn't respond for a moment. "I remember living high up in the slums of La Paz. Unlike coffee, with people, the higher up the mountain you live, the poorer you are. This was after my father had left, but well before I met Alvarez. My mother had a new boyfriend move in soon thereafter. Sure enough, soon he was putting his fingers where they shouldn't have been on my 12-year-old body. I still remember his coarse whiskers scratching my face, the Singani on his breath." "Did he go to jail?" Marquez shook her head. "I spotted him. 10 years later on a crowded street in La Paz. Soon after I completed basic training. I had my strider knife on me, and I almost stabbed him through the heart with it. But instead I put a note in his pocket, letting him know all was forgiven. Along with those 2 fingers. Francesca didn't doubt the story's veracity for a moment. It was true that a woman like Marquez had the skills to get revenge herself on a man like Umberto, the courage to use those skills and the discretion to know when and where to do so. She was truly exceptional. And that was the problem. Francesca couldn't count on her little doe-eyed Manuelita or the other children she had met at the camp to become hardened, streetwise operators able to dispense their own vigilante justice. Never mind that even Marquez hadn't stopped the crimes being done to her in the first place. Francesca went back to the bench as nonchalantly as possible and grabbed the glasses of wine flutes again. I can see us staying here a long time. Long enough to change this country. Fundamentally. Soon, children won't have to wait years and risk their lives to exact revenge. She said to Marquez as she returned. Soon, men like Umberto will go straight to jail instead of a prestigious post. A toast to not having to make compromises, she said as she handed Marquez the poisoned flute. I don't think I like this vintage, Marquez replied as she unceremoniously poured the wine on the ground while heading back to her cabin. Thank you, my dear, Ron said to Francesca on the secure line in her quaint cabin the following morning. The thorn in our side has been removed. The operation would not have been a success without you. What are you talking about? Francesca replied. She didn't go for the wine. She didn't even stay in the same cabin. She stayed in town. Wouldn't say exactly where. Yes, I figured all of that might happen. That's why we put nano-trackers on the wine flute. Our sharpshooter and his infrared scope put a poison dart in her neck last night to save her the trouble of drinking it this time. We got confirmation of her death this morning. Francesca's complicity in the death of this woman she had come to admire caused a wave of guilt and sadness to well up inside her, albeit not regret. Unfortunate but necessary, she said. Her death will save thousands of women and children. Especially your little Manuelita, Ron said to Francesca's shock. That one you said you'd become the devil to protect? I don't think I've asked you to go that far yet, but it was good to see you had the stones to hand Marquez that glass. You've been tracking me and my conversations, Francesca said indignantly. How? It doesn't matter. What does matter is the tracking helped put my faith in you. Well, I'm surprised to hear that, since your tracking got it wrong. I was talking about all the children I'm trying to protect, not just Manuelita. People care about themselves, and maybe on a good day, a few people around themselves, Ron replied. Stick with me, and you'll have 2 assigned CVs to protect those few. Since when are you controlling the CVs? I'm representing the interests of a few of them who have smartened up. And soon, a few will be all I need.